There we go. So welcome back, everybody. The second of 3 sessions of Track B of the Maine Food Convergence. Thank you all for being here. We had a great discussion last week and looking forward to continuing that on. My name is Scott Vlan. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for an Ecology-Based Economy here in Norway. We are a member of our Community Food Matters, which is our local community food council, which is a member of the Maine Network of Community Food Councils, which is one of the core members of the Maine Food Convergence Project. So you get the idea. We are a network of networks here, of networks. I'm really honored to work with Heather Augustine of Wabanaki Reach on co-coordinating this track. And you'll be hearing from Heather a little bit later when we have our speakers. I hope everybody's had an opportunity to look at some of the information that was sent out in our participant packet. There was a lot to look at there. The systems map has been really useful to some people and not so much for others, but kind of gives a sense of the complexity of what we're working with. And if you were here last week, some of this will be a little redundant, and my apologies. If you weren't here last week or for the opening session, no worries. There's going to be, you'll be able to catch right on, and wherever you are in this whole process right now is the right place to be. We just also like to add that there's a lot of expertise in this room, a lot of people with a lot of experience. There may also be people with very little experience, and we value equally those voices. And sometimes people that know the least can add the most. So wherever you are in this work, we all have important insights to add, and we're all in this together. So again, thanks for being here. We really look forward to working with everybody for the next couple of weeks to make some headway on building a just, equitable, and resilient food system for Maine. We're gonna have a little poll right now just to get a sense of how many people were here last week. So if you could just pop a yes or no in there, and we'll take a look at that in a few seconds and see. It looks like most of us were here, but there's a few, maybe 20% or so that were not.
As you all do that too, I just want to make a quick tech note. If you go and likely in your upper right hand corner of the screen, there's a button that says view. And if you want to see a few more people, you can choose side by side gallery. Or something like that, or standard gallery. So you can see a few more faces. That's it, in the gallery mode.
Great, so let's end the poll. Looks like about 80% of us were here last time and about 20% not. So some of this information will be useful for the new folks. So today you can go to the next slide there, Joelle. Yeah, so we're going to hear a story today from one of the Maine Youth Change Makers, Paige Nygaard. Then we're going to set up and try to frame our priorities, the 3 priorities that were chosen. We have 5 amazing speakers that are going to speak very briefly for 5 minutes each about some of the priorities. Some of the speakers are going to be speaking specifically to certain priorities. Others will be more generally speaking to some overarching issues. Then we're going to hear from Ken Morse on some policy integration and about some public policy work that's happening that's related to our tracks. And then we're going to dig in for the last half of the session. We'll take a break, and then we're going to dig in deep to this breakout room work to try to really come up with some ideas and strategies and activities to make this work and to push this work forward. And then we're going to come back after the breakout and cross-pollinate between and share out some ideas. So quickly, some tech notes. I just got to get rid of this poll. Andy just talked about how you view this, but the speaker view can really work well for this, and you can slide that bar in the middle back and forth to minimize the speaker and maximize the screen, but you can still see who's talking. If we get Zoom bombed, just look for a link, and we'll start right back up on a different link. Please mute unless you're talking. Take care of yourself. We're going to be here for 3 hours. If you need to take a quick break, please do that, but just don't log off, and just turn off your camera, mute, whatever, and come back and join in. And if you have any tech issues, just chat Sandy privately in the chat, and she can help you out, hopefully. Moving on, we are going to be recording the session, and we will be also taking screenshots. So if you're not comfortable with that, just feel free to shut your camera off. But otherwise, we like it when everybody has the camera on so people can see who's here and get a little better sense of community, because it really is a drag that we can't do this in person the way we had hoped originally, but we're going to do the best we can, take advantage of this technology. So just a quick reminder and a little bit of regrounding here. The mission of this Maine Food Convergence project is really about relationship building. And hopefully through relationship building, through these relationships will emerge greater trust and help us to visualize and to manifest this food system that we're looking for. So our mission is to develop deeper relationships and greater trust as we co-create an equitable and thriving food system for Maine. Before we dive in to the activities here, Annie's gonna just do a land acknowledgement. Annie, do you want to jump in on that?
So another brief grounding. So we'd like to take a moment of silence and a few deep breaths to acknowledge that we are zooming in from and occupying the traditional homelands of the Wapanaki people of the Dawn. Just take a couple of deep breaths, perhaps the deepest breath you've taken all day. And I'm going to put in the chat a couple of resources for folks who would like to learn more. Oops. About the Wabanaki tribes, the land, and also other racial equity in the food systems resources. Back to you, Scott.
I hope everybody's had a chance to look at this map and learn about which tribe was on the land that they are now occupying. So real quick, our track team B is myself and Heather Augustine, as well as Sandy Gilbreth, who's doing our tech today, and Annie, who you just met, who's our fearless cat herder coordinator for the whole project, and Joelle Alberry, who is with us today, also running these slides. So so we're going to move forward a little bit of framing before we get to our next group of speakers. I just want to reiterate, we're in session 2 here. Last week, we all came together. We identified these priorities, the 3 that we're going to work on. Today, we're going to develop those priorities further in the breakouts. And then next week, we're going to try to do a little more organizing and come up with some concrete actions moving forward. There probably will not be enough time to do a lot of that work. So I'm encouraging everybody, if you haven't gotten on the Slack channel yet, to just get on there and share ideas, share projects, share whatever you want. I think we're putting that Slack link in the chat right now. So let's see if we can get that Slack up and running and make that a vital part of this, especially in between sessions. It'll give us a chance to share notes a little bit on our breakouts. So our pathways to change, we have this theory of change map that we shared. And so what we're trying to do here is get from these current conditions, which you can see here are complicated, and there's just so much to deal with, from the systemic racism and corporate consolidation, broken treaties, lack of access to capital, lack of access to land, that whole tribal sovereignty issue in Maine. Our ecosystems are being degraded constantly. And a lot of our what we're responsible for in the Maine food system is not just the ecosystems in Maine, but the ecosystems where our food is being grown. And if you ever look out in the Midwest, you can see that our current food system is extractive. We're destroying soils, we're destroying water tables with loss of biodiversity, all of those things that are kind of on us as eaters. And then we look at the effects of climate change on our hunting, fishing, gathering, our agriculture. And we look at policy and the way it reinforces a system, a broken system, and the people that are exploiting people and planet for profit are being supported by policy as opposed to the other way around. So there's a lot, and the exploitation of food workers here. So there's a lot of nuts to crack, but we're going to square off on some of this and our vision for this food system. And this is the overall vision of the climate convergence. Is it abundant, equitable, and resilient farming and fishing systems that increase the quantity and quality, and we'll see quality change as soils improve and food and our supply chains shorten. We'll see higher quality food in Maine, and our fishing and farming communities are well supported, and we restore clean water and healthy soils and see that biodiversity come back, and our food workers have living wages and access and dignity. And we really visualize tribal sovereignty and leadership in this process because the Indigenous people here managed and lived in harmony with this land for thousands of years before we started going down this path. So that's a little bit about our vision. And as you know, or maybe don't know, these out of our 8 priorities, after last week, we looked at how people voted, but also we looked at on the jam boards. And these are the 3 that rose to the top in no particular order here. Access to land and water, building bridges between the tribal and permaculture regenerative ag communities, and also working on climate adaptation in our fishing and farming and supply chains. And we'll have more about that. We'll break those down a little bit coming up. So if you already know which group you want to be in, now would be a good time to there's a spreadsheet. I believe it was just put up. Yep, it's put up in the chat. You can go into that spreadsheet and just put your name in the track that you want to participate in. If you're still on the fence, there'll be more information about that later after we hear from these speakers. So I'm going to turn this over to Heather to introduce the speakers. And if you have questions for the speakers as we go, put those in the chat. And then Heather will try to come back at the end and bring some of those back, but some of the speakers may be able to answer those in the chat as well. So Heather, do you want to jump in here?
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. And Scott, thank you so much for all your wisdom, really centering tribal issues in this convergence. I appreciate that. So this next part of the program, I am really looking forward to hearing from these great presenters that we have. We'll hear from Sarah Simon from Maine Farmland Trust. Sarah's Farmland Access and Farm Viability Program Director at the Maine Farmland Trust and co-coordinates the Soil Health Network. We'll hear from Ethan Miller. He's the Organizational Development Coordinator for Land in Common, a member-run community land trust in Green, Maine. Kate Wallace is the Program Director at the Resilience Hub in Portland and co-host of the Portland Permaculture Meetup. Josh Roy is a Senior Conservation Scientist for the Nature Conservancy in Maine, and he's here to discuss river restoration. And thank you, Josh, for joining so late. I appreciate you. And we're also here from Josh Wood. He is an organizer in Sanford, Maine, who currently serves on the core leadership board for Maine Youth for Climate Justice. This summer, he organized racial justice protests in 3 different states. So Sarah, if you're ready, we'd love to hear from you.
Sure, thank you, Heather, and thank you, Scott. Can you all hear me clearly?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, it's an honor to go first, and I'm so looking forward to hearing what everyone else has to share and being part of this bigger conversation that you all have started. I'm Sarah. I work for the Maine Farmland Trust, which is a statewide organization that protects farmland and supports farmers. And Maine Farmland Trust presently works primarily with commercial farmers, so people seeking to make their farm a primary source of their family income. And our main tool for farmland protection right now is through purchased and donated permanent conservation easements, as well as through a program called Buy, Protect, Sell, where we are purchasing farmland at risk of development and placing an easement on it, and then enabling a transfer to an incoming farmer at a lower price as the result of that easement. So the easement work we do is primarily aimed at preventing the immediate loss of farmland through real estate development, as well as lowering the purchase price for new farmers. But I think an important part of the conversation is to acknowledge that permanent land easements are an imperfect tool, and they can often have unintended consequences. And that is definitely something we reflect upon at Maine Farmland Trust, and that I would invite anyone who's here who wants to dig into that question to reach out to me, and I can put my email in the chat and continue that conversation. However, I do not work on the land protection side. I work kind of on the other piece, which is how do we support farmers to keep their businesses viable? All the easements in the world can't do that. And so what are all the other services and system changes that we need to keep farms viable? And my personal focus in our department, which also includes business planning and statewide food access initiatives, is supporting farms with climate change adaptation and mitigation. So I'm so glad and of course, relieved that that's one of your priorities, because it's such a major issue that is already affecting farmers in the state. So this year, some of what I wanted to share with you is our kind of developing and pilot stage work in this area, which is a pretty new one for MFT. This year I'm participating in something called the Climate Adaptation Fellowship, which is a fellowship through the US Department of Agriculture's Climate Hub in the Northeast to train service providers, people that work with and advise farmers, and farmers in pairs to create plans for climate adaptation and mitigation on their farms. So I'm working with Melissa Law from Bumbleroot Organic Farm in Windham, and we've identified erosion as the biggest climate risk on her farm, and are currently putting together a plan for how she can integrate perennial contour buffer strips consisting of both woody perennials that she can harvest for her flower business, as well as for plant sales, and also grassy strips to break up the slope so that she's losing less soil due to erosion in the increasingly frequent heavy rainfall events that we're seeing in our region. So this fellowship has been a great way to develop skills that I hope we will integrate into more of the services that we offer farmers. Climate risk has to be a part of every farmer's way of thinking about their business, both in their financials and also in their land use management and planning. And it's something that we would really like to be supporting more farmers with in the coming years, because these are huge decisions. Melissa primarily runs an annual vegetable farm. So incorporating perennials into her business requires a large upfront financial investment that we are currently planning to structure her cash flow around. So it's a big topic, and one that I hope we will continue working with farmers on. And if anyone here is a farmer and is interested in getting involved with that, or knows anyone, that would also be a fantastic way to collaborate and start assisting more farmers with these difficult decisions. The second opportunity for collaboration that I wanted to share, if I'm not going over my time, is our Soil Health Network pilot program, which we're going to be starting in the next couple of weeks. And it's a pilot because we're starting small. We're going to engage 10 farms that also have easements in a study modeled off of what another group of farmers have been doing in both Pennsylvania and Maryland. They've been working together and tracking their soil health over the course of several years, monitoring and evaluating the effects of their management practices on improving soil health. And so the cohort model is meant to be supportive, help farmers find community with others who are making these decisions, as well as giving them the data and detailed soil reports that are needed to see what the effects of the changes in management are like. So that's another opportunity I'm very excited about, and also welcome people to reach out to me on. So I saw I had a minute left, probably a minute ago. So I will end here, and I'm so excited to hear from everyone else, and really looking forward to being part of the discussion today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. And maybe if you have a chance to put some of those resources into the chat in your information, if people want to reach out to you later on. Josh, Roy, can we hear from you next? I know you have a time sensitive little, thank you for squeezing us in today. I just want to say that 100 times.
There we go. Sorry, my screen setup changed to the last minute, so it was exciting. It's good to be here. So thank you for having me, and it's really neat to sort of jump into a new community, and surprising to me after being in Maine and working since '89 as an adult in Maine on landscape protection and describing our natural resources, to see that there's this whole other community of people that is doing wonderful things that I've never met before. What fun. I haven't gone through this full list, so if you're there and you're like, wait, I'm here, you know me, sorry about that. But I work for the Nature Conservancy, senior scientist. I've been doing this for 22 years, and my focus as a landscape ecologist is to bring the science of conservation to our decisions about where we work and what we do in those places, and how we measure that our work is having the impact that we hope it will. The Nature Conservancy, if you don't know, is a global nonprofit, non-governmental organization. We work in 74 countries around the world. My work is in Maine, and there's part of my time is for global work. About half of it is for work, either global at large around river restoration for restored fisheries, or particularly in Europe with policy around river restoration there. But it all grew out of my work here in Maine, which grew out of the Penobscot River Restoration Project. So although we've been looking at land conservation around the state, and we're the largest private land conservation owner in the world, we're the 12th largest landowner writ large in the state of Maine. We've helped protect over 2.4 million acres of our 22 million acre state. So we've got a neat history here, but it wasn't until about 2000, 2002 that we realized we were completely missing the point on certain facets of freshwater protection. All the life, not just fish, but all the crayfish and salamanders, the birds that fly over these streams that need connectivity of the rivers. Rivers need to be connected to thrive. And they need to be connected to the ocean in some cases, but if they're headwater systems, for instance, we're the last best place in the country for eastern brook trout. If we want to have Maine as the stronghold for brook trout, we need to have better interconnected headwater streams as well. These fish will travel over 70 miles over the course of a growing season if given the chance. That means they have access to warm water in the winter when it's very cold out to find bugs, cold water in the summer because they are limited by warm water, so they want to find cold water as a refuge, deep water when it's drought time, to get out of the flood water at high water times to small channels. So they really need to move around a lot to find prey, to find mates, and avoid predators. So the Penobscot River Restoration Project asked the Nature Conservancy to join late in the game to reconnect about 2,000 miles of main stem habitat for salmon, as well as the other 11 species of sea-run fish there. And it was only through this project that we became aware of how fragmented our stream systems are. Most road stream crossings that cross these headwater systems that I was just talking about are barriers to fish and other wildlife. They're barriers to sediment movement. They're barriers to wood and other debris that help create the stream channels, but also help them adapt to the changing climate. So when I look at restoration of the Kennebec River or the Penobscot River, I see these examples where by just letting rivers act like rivers again, we can bring back an incredible amount of health, restore rights to people who've been deprived of those rights since we settled these rivers and started damming them and blocking the upstream migration of fish. Particularly important at the end of the winter, sort of the hungry times when other food sources are scarce and people are anticipating those runs of fish coming up the river. These rivers used to run silver with fish, filling them from bank to bank every year. And it's why Indigenous people settled along these river mouths and river falls where fish had to pause before they moved upstream. And it's why white settlers, when they came in, took over these fantastic spots, took over these cleared agricultural lands, and took over these fishing spots, often depriving upstream cultures of their sustenance at critical times of the year. So the fact that we're restoring rivers for nature is clearly a part of a larger system, and our indigenous people were part of that nature. So I'm privileged to be a part of some of these large projects that are restoring some of these traditional rights, restoring ecology, and restoring connections to river, which I think are critically important. So I think we're all better people for our connections with nature. I think probably everyone on this call knows that our connections with nature, our time in nature, make us healthier people mentally and physically, which I don't like to separate. And so if we can create better places around our rivers, healthier rivers, create better communities, we can provide better sources of food and economic benefit. This is the source of bait for lobster fishery, our #1 fishery. Our #2 marine fishery is elvers. These are also sea-run fish. So I'm hopeful because this work is happening more now than ever. So thank you for inviting me and making this interesting connection, and appreciate the work you're all doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josh. I really appreciate, I love talking about rivers, so hopefully we can have a chance to have another 100 talks about rivers someday. Thank you. And Ethan, are you ready to share? We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Heather. And thank you to Annie and Scott and the other organizers. It's a real honor to be here. Thanks to Sarah and Josh. So I'm Ethan Miller. I'm an organizer and board member of Land in Common Community Land Trust. And we're committed, as our mission says, to building a multi-generational land base for sustainable livelihoods in Maine. And I want to share just some brief thoughts about land justice and decolonization that have been emerging from our work over the last couple of years and in conversations with lots of people from whom we've been learning. And I just hope that this can be useful in framing some of the conversations that are to come. So Land in Common began more than 12 years ago with this intention of creating an organization that could bring land into a democratically controlled community commons, to protect the land in perpetuity, to redistribute its use in a secure long-term way to people doing good work, people who would not otherwise have access to land. So certainly an equity vision at the heart there. And this is all well and good, and I deeply believe in this vision. I've committed my life to it in so many ways, but there's a big problem here. And that is that Land in Common has been an entirely white, settler-led organization for the majority of its existence. Everyone who currently lives on land that's held by Land in Common is white and settler descended. And we've been working to build a so-called commons on land that has been stolen by violence and deceit from Wabanaki people. So what all of this means is that no matter how good our intentions are, no matter how radical our values are, no matter how cool our permaculture practice is, no matter how cooperative and democratic our organizational structures might be, we are still complicit in ongoing harm unless confronting these realities of power and privilege are absolutely central to our work. So to be honest, we could, because of our privilege and unearned power, basically ignore these realities and proceed with our good work, right? We could share our vision enthusiastically, we could raise lots of money, we could acquire more land, we could give PowerPoints about how innovative and transformative and wonderful our work is. And this would be like putting a pretty bandage on an infected wound without cleaning it out first. And so, like so many white settler people who love the land and who want to be connected to the land, I want to have a sense of belonging. I want to have a sense of being at home here in this place where I live. And I want to be part of work that feels deeply transformative and inspiring. I want to respond to urgent needs for land protection and for building alternative systems of livelihood in our communities. But as I and other Land in Common folks have asked Wabanaki organizers and other organizers of color in Maine for feedback about our work, we've been learning what they should not have to tell us, which is that if we use our power and privilege to skip over the slow, painful, incredibly difficult work of stopping racist colonial harm and healing from this long history of violence. If we skip over that work, our work will only end up being part of that history, no matter how important or urgent we think our work is. And so we can't skip over the work of undoing white supremacy and colonialism and magically arrive at belonging, at some kind of sustainable inhabitation of our places as settlers. That's a white settler fantasy. And so Land in Common is in the midst of a slow and challenging process of reckoning, of transforming our leadership, transforming our culture, our practices, and our model, maybe in a way that's going to be unrecognizable to those of us that started this thing. But we're transforming it so that this work really is at the heart of everything we do. And we don't know where it's headed. And in reality, it's not up to us. I'm really excited to see that questions of land justice and decolonization seem to be rising higher on the priority list in the world of food systems here in Maine, and definitely at this convergence. And I have huge appreciation for the work that all of you are doing on this. I'm really excited to be working together with you on it. I'm especially grateful to those of you on the call who have been helping me learn what I need to learn along the way. And I just want to close by saying that this justice and healing work, healing from white supremacy and colonialism, can't be a side project. It can't be an add-on to our work. It can't be like holding a couple diversity, equity, and inclusion workshops every year and reading some cool books on the side. If we can't make this work central to all of our organizations, then we need to be asking whether these organizations should actually continue to exist. And I know this isn't easy for many of us to hear. It's not easy for me to hear, and it's not easy to do. And this is because the ancestors of us settlers didn't do their work. They passed the buck on to us. And so now we need to learn how to finally become good ancestors for our descendants and for everyone else's. So I'm really happy to follow up with any of you on this work and be in conversation about how to move it forward. And thanks all so much for listening. And I'll put my email in the chat so we can have some follow-up conversation. Thanks a lot.
Wow, Ethan, that was powerful. I'm telling you, I appreciate your vulnerability, your transparency, and you just keeping it realness that you just brought to this conversation. Well, Alan. Okay, it kind of took my breath away. Kate Wallace, we'd love to hear from you next.
Hi, everyone. Ethan, thank you so much for that. That took my breath away as well. And yeah, just really, I feel you in the heart. And oh, am I unmuted now? Could you all hear me before?
Yep.
Okay.
You're good.
Okay. So I am here so I'm the programs director at the Resilience Hub in Portland, which is an organization that does permaculture education and design, and also community building around more resilient communities and connections between people. And Jesse and Kessie last week defined permaculture. I can just give a quick definition to sort of frame this third track, which is about bridging the permaculture community with the tribal communities. And so permaculture is essentially a design system. The term was coined by two Australian guys in the 1970s, and it weaves together these various disciplines of ecology and agriculture and regional planning. And so essentially we're talking about observing our landscapes, mimicking natural patterns, and designing ecosystems that are beneficial for humans as well as other beings on the planet, large and small. And so a lot of the work at the Resilience Hub has been about creating connections and redistributing surplus amongst people. So redistributing, sharing skills, sharing land, plants, seeds, mentorship. We've been involved in projects like the Maine Tool Library, which is a lending library for tools, in Portland, and also the Mount Joy Orchard, which is a free for all, free to pick orchard in the East End. And so what we're talking about are really sort of creating these projects and these relationships that exist outside of the capitalist economy and models, and really allow for like human connections and mutual aid. And so I just want to acknowledge, last week, Jesse sort of gave a spiel about what permaculture is and why decolonization in permaculture is important. And Kessie followed that up with, well, essentially what you're talking about is intellectual property theft. And I think there is like a lot of validity to that. And I wanted to just repeat that for folks who aren't here. When we're talking about like settler folks like myself, when we're talking about being in right relationship to land, and like about designing these, groovy ecosystems and perennial food forests that will last for generations, we're talking about doing this on what is stolen land. And so like, where's the reckoning point in that? And, how do we proceed in this work? We've had a lot of conversations at the Hub about this, and Ethan, I think you put it really well when you said that if we're not centering this work, we're just putting a Band-Aid over a festering wound. And so that has been our work. And frankly, I don't think that we've done it. We've had a lot of conversations about it. We haven't done it particularly well. And I think moving forward, it really needs to be a priority for us, especially given the work that we're engaged in. So yeah, I guess I can leave it there, and I'm sort of curious to see where these conversations head. So thank you for centering this and for including me here.
Thank you so much, Kate, for being here. I appreciate your work that you're doing and the path that you're on. I can only think that it's going to lead to really good healing places. So thank you for that. And for our last speaker, who is a hard act to follow, that's why I put Josh Wood as the last speaker. We're looking forward to hearing from you, Josh.
For having me. My name is Josh, and I'm going to talk a little bit about equity today and how it is intersectional to resiliency and land justice. I'm so excited to see some of our shared goals are advancing conservation and abundance equity. So I currently split my work between two organizations called Maine Strikes and Maine Youth for Climate Justice. This summer, I also co-founded the statewide Black Lives Matter movement, which you may have known as Black Lives Matter Maine. Now, Maine Strikes in the past, we've held climate strikes across the state in conjunction with many other organizations working towards advancing some of the same goals that I've heard here. Some of our demands most commonly include honoring the treaties of protecting Indigenous lands, waters, and sovereignty, by the immediate halt of all construction, leasing, and permit for resource extraction, processing, and infrastructure process, or affecting on Indigenous lands, which is why we are engaged in stuff like stopping the CMP corridor. Another one of our goals is recognizing the rights of nature into law to protect our sacred ecosystems and align human law with natural law to ban resource extraction in defense of our environment and people. So I heard a theme reiterated here a lot today about colonization and building anti-colonial spaces. And that's really what we emphasize at Maine Strikes and Maine Youth for Climate Justice as youth fighting for a better future. So we're not stopping there with climate strikes. Most recently, we've passed priority bills through the state legislature and supported multiple grassroots-led organizations in the shared goal of rectifying the climate crisis through the abolition of stuff like corporate elitism, racism, and of course, colonization. As a Black youth, this is especially important to me, as is solidarity with our Indigenous brothers and sisters. Black and Indigenous solidarity is at the root of the work I and many other of my fellow youth organizers do in small cities. Whether that's divesting from the use of militarization in Sanford, partnering with friends at Maine Equal Justice to close Long Creek, or building anti-colonial spaces in small places together, combining our big ideas. So in talking to dozens of city councils and governments about the issues and the themes that I see here, I always emphasize that we are not here because we want to be. We are here because we have to be. We are here because we are fighting for our future, essentially. And really, when we disrupt political systems that have not been serving people, whether they're xenophobic, racist, misogynistic, we are showing that what we ask for is not too much. People's commitment to our survival is never too much to ask for. And I think that is evident in our partnerships with Indigenous communities, our partnerships with Black communities, our partnerships across Maine for geographically marginalized youth especially. And when we keep in mind who we are advocating for, that is when we can make spaces truly equitable. So I really just want to thank you guys today for having me. I know I kept it kind of brief just because I wasn't sure about my time limit. But if you have any questions, I'll leave my email in the chat, and I'll leave my website for Maine Youth for Climate Justice and Maine Strikes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Josh. You certainly give me hope for the future, that's for sure. I appreciate all your work. It's amazing. So thank you so much. Okay. Do we have time for questions, Annie? I'm not sure.
Not really, sorry.
Okay, okay.
Encourage people to write questions in the chat to any of our speakers.
Excellent. Okay. So Scott, are you up next or is it me?
We were going to share going through some of our priorities, but before we start, I just want to thank everyone who just spoke. It's like you guys all crushed it, and the combination of all of that knowledge and thought really just does an amazing job for framing our work moving forward here. So thanks again. And I know a lot of you guys did that at the last minute, and yeah, awesome.
Yes,
so
thank you so much.
Yeah. And so we're going to go a little deeper into our priorities. We went through our jam boards and kind of extracted some information, and Heather's going to do the first couple, and then I'm going to talk about the last one before we move into some policy stuff. So you want to?
Yes, excellent. Thanks, Scott. So here, you probably received an email throughout the week. If not, here are the track B top priorities that we identified in the survey that we all took together last week. So land trusts and easements, land and water sovereignty. I mean, that's really important to me. And I was really, really hoping that would have made it to the top of the list. Do you want to take the next couple, Scott?
Well, so you're working on the one, so we have three slides here. We have the land and water rights access. So those are all part of that. I can run from here and then.
Yeah, I can't get back and forth on my screens to see my notes. So since you're so good on the fly, will you take these?
Yeah, so
Heather, Heather, press escape out of your full screen.
I'm trying to, it just keeps freezing up on me, so.
Right.
So just to reiterate, the three priorities that rose to the top here were land and water rights and access, building bridges between tribal and the permaculture and regenerative ag communities, and climate adaptation and fishing, farming, and supply chain. So the first one that we're just breaking down was the land and water rights access. And these are some of the issues that surfaced. You know, Heather mentioned the first couple there. Some people had asked about aquaculture and what's the appropriate scale for that, because in some cases we see like the Aroostook Band of Micmac doing aquaculture at a really appropriate scale, and we see other aquaculture projects that seem to be threatening to ecosystems. We just talked about dam removal and river restoration, which seems super important, and then how we steward and who stewards our public lands. And then the next priority is the building bridges. Heather, do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Uh-oh.
Heather's computer is freezing up, Scott, so
So I'll continue on. And this is one that Heather and I have been working together on this project for the last couple of months. And this came up almost immediately. And as we were starting this, there was a lot of stuff coming from the permaculture community that I'm involved with and other people, organizers, talking about this schism or this perceived schism between the permaculture world and Indigenous people. So we thought we would put this out there as a potential priority, and a lot of people thought it was a good idea. So some of the issues that have come up, and Kate, I think, did a good job of talking about what does atonement for cultural appropriation and commercialization of Indigenous lifeways look like? Like, how do we move forward here? How do we decolonize these movements? The notion of language, like when we talk about things like primitive skills and rewilding, like understanding that talking about wilderness can cause harm because there was no wilderness here. This is a land that was inhabited from time immemorial, and when settlers came here, they couldn't even see the fact that this land was inhabited and stewarded, and the people that were living here were at one with it and part of it. The notion of our genetic heritage, seed saving, so much of that genetic heritage is being lost all the time. So working on some ways to bring some of that stuff back. And we've been talking a lot about collaborative projects, like what would it look like if the permaculture community, the regenerative ag community came together with the Indigenous community and built a food forest that was inspired by the tribes. So lots of potential there for building some bridges and making some things happen and doing it in a, shoulder to shoulder on the land as opposed to on Zoom. And our final priority, and these were in no particular order, I think this one was very high too: climate adaptation in fishing, farming, and supply chains. And of course, they're all overlap and everything. This system is so complex, but to talk about what are the climate threats to our food system, to our agriculture, to our forests and foraging and fishing, and then what kind of incentives could be put forth to change those practices that are to go from climate destructive to climate resilient and climate to help mitigate. So a lot of things that came up in the jam boards were like increasing crop diversity, and Sarah just talked about that, perennial and tree crops as opposed to annual grain crops, working on soil health and soil carbon and organic matter, which helps with water storage and terraforming land and building ponds and mitigating flood and drought cycles, looking at drip irrigation in certain situations to limit water use, low and no-till cover cropping, those kinds of things. And the notion of carbon farming has also come up a lot, where we would be literally paying people to increase carbon in their soil as part of the climate solution. How we work with animals on the land, in the landscape, rotational grazing practices. Silvopasture is basically rotational grazing under trees. Speaking of Maine Farmland Trust, a few years ago, John Piatti wrote this seminal piece called "Restoring Maine's Lost Farmland," and warned against, everybody's looking at Maine to feed the Northeast, and really warning against just cutting that forest back down the way it was in the 1800s, which, as much as it was like cutting it down for agriculture, it was also really an act of cultural genocide, because the forest was the food system for the Indigenous people that were here, and cutting that forest down left them with no access, and agriculture was not the way they were feeding themselves. So lots of great ideas there, and hopefully in the next couple of sessions, we're going to really unpack some of this stuff and point to a lot of projects that are already underway that people can access and become part of, and form new coalitions and new conversations moving forward, and find some collective action to really dig into some of this stuff. So So all that said, so now people maybe get a better sense. So make sure you sign up for which of these priorities you want to dig in on. And if there's, you can't really decide, we have the law of 2 feet here. If you're in there, I mean, I don't know what the equivalent is on Zoom, but if you're in one group and you're like, man, I really want to find out about that climate adaptation group, but you're in the building bridges group, you know, feel free to go back to the tech person and say, I want to switch and get involved in that. And hopefully, again, we can have these conversations continue in the Slack channel so that people can get involved in multiple conversations here and share ideas. So one big part of this, throughout all of these tracks and all of the priorities within the tracks, we want to center diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. We also want to center policy, because policy, whether it's local, state, or federal, is some of our most powerful tools. We see public policy in many ways supporting an extractive agriculture system, food system that is not nourishing people, it's not feeding a hungry planet, it's creating huge profits. So there's a lot that can happen in policy, and I'd like to introduce someone who's a dear friend of mine and colleague to give us some framework around the importance of public policy in this work. So I'm honored to pass the baton over to Ken Morse. He is a network maven. He's done more to talk about and to establish the critical importance of building networks in this food system work, and helped inspire this Maine Food Convergence project to begin with before he dove in headfirst into politics. He's worked with Maine Farm to School, Maine Farm to Institution, New England Food Vision. He is now the coordinator of the Food Policy Working Group, and he's also my co-coordinator, thankfully, at the Maine Network of Community Food Councils, which he helped to create many years ago. So without further ado, Morse.
Yes, there's another side.
Somebody's, Kate, somebody can mute Kate. Sounds like she's got her baby there. Ken, are you there?
Yep.
All right, hey Ken.
Scott.
Thanks for being here, buddy.
Yeah, it's great to be here with everyone and just see how far we come as kind of an old fart in this movement, who's been working on these things since the days of Fedco Warehouse about 50 years ago. It's really encouraging to see how much it's grown and how many different folks are working on bringing our food system back home in a much healthier way. So any chance we could get the slides up? I don't know who is doing the slides. There we go. So yeah, so I'm working a lot on policy right now through the Food Policy Work Group, which has grown out of a sort of collaboration, but led by Maine Farm to Institution. And what we're trying to do is really make policy more transparent and make it so all of us can learn what's going on and make a difference. It's a tool for translating our values into action and can be a pretty powerful tool. So one of the key things that we're doing is publishing a weekly newsletter. I think I sent it to everybody that had registered, and right at the top is a link, and we'd love to have you subscribe. And you have been actually in droves since Monday when I sent those out. Over 100 people have subscribed, so keep it up. The policy is very complex, and there's no way we could spend much time on it right here. So I'd urge you to sign up for the newsletter, and you'll get a lot more information. I've listed here some of the key slides, key bills, sorry, that I think relate to the 3 areas that we're talking about here today. I'm not going to, you can read them. You may want to make a note of the numbers if they resonate with you. You can always Google Maine Legislature bill search and put in the LD number and get more information about them. One note, there's over 2,000 bills submitted each year. We've identified over 100 food bills. They go through a process which is called the revisers, and until they come out of that, it's very hard to find out much about them. So there's still a lot that don't have LD numbers yet, but there's more coming out every week. So you can see here, there's bills about the various topics that we're talking about. And I would urge any of you that I'm just learning about these bills. You can't always tell by the original introduced titles what they're fully about. I'm relying on many of you and many partners that have been working with legislators on them to help me understand them and figure out which one. Some are good bills and a few are not so good bills. So if you can help, that would be great. We'll just go on to, I know how tight the time is, so we'll just go to the next slide. Like I said, I would urge you to subscribe to the policy news. I'd urge you to take on a reporter role to let me know what that I need to learn about, because I'm just learning about these things. And a lot of people have been helping from like Good Shepherd Food Bank and MOFCA and Full Plates, Full Potential, and Rhiannon Hampson from Pingree's office, who's with us today, is starting to provide information about federal bills. And in fact, she just sent me something that will go into the newsletter this week. And I'll put more information about all those bills on the earlier page in this week's newsletter. So hopefully you'll take action and get involved and advocate for good bills. Get in touch with your legislators. You'll be seeing, if you get the newsletter, when the hearings are. Most of the hearings are by Zoom now. And I'll put the link so you can sign up to the newsletter in the chat. And my email is pretty simple. It's right there if you want to get in touch with me. That would be great. And I want to do what I didn't do yesterday. I want to run under instead of over. So I'll wrap it up there.
Thank you so much, Ken. It's awesome that you're taking this on, because I must say, trying to keep track of food and climate bills over the last few years is a daunting task. So having someone like you that's holding this container is great. And I've learned a ton just through the meetings, and look forward to this newsletter to keep abreast of things. So I guess we're gonna take a little break here, give everybody a chance to stretch if you haven't stepped out into the springtime weather. Now's a good time to do that. Don't forget to sign up for one of the priorities, and we're going to build the breakout rooms now. So when you come back, we'll be able to go directly to the breakout rooms and roll up our sleeves and get to work. Anything to add there, Annie?
Nope, just working away at the breakout rooms. Sign up is again in the chat, so if you haven't yet, please do so. And if you are on the phone or something, you can just stay in the big room when we go into breakout rooms, and we'll put you in a room after that.
Before we go through, I just love to point out this beautiful painting. Carly Woods, who's been organizing, doing a lot of our graphics and stuff, reached out to Maine artists that do food-related work, and this piece by Maddie Rose Templeton. She's a local here in the Norway, South Paris area, and she's an amazing artist. But I just love that piece, and take time to read this beautiful quote by Porter Gale too, because this is about relationships. So I'll see you guys in a few minutes. Well, great. Well, I hope everybody had a
There's
good.
still about 5 to 8 folks that haven't signed up for a breakout room yet.
That's fine. If they get, ooh, like glasses. If they come into the main session, you can assign them. Otherwise, they might be on the phone or something and not be paying attention. So,
And last chance to sign up. And if we assign you to a breakout room, and it's not the one that you want to be in, you can go back to Sandy and she can reassign you. But hopefully, maybe some people just want to just roll the dice because they're all so amazing. Well, anyway, welcome back, everybody. We're getting ready to go into the breakouts. Before we do that, we just want to kind of run through a couple of little details. I'm going to pull a few nuggets out of our Convergence Agreements before we sit down and start talking to each other. And then, yeah, so let's just do that. Can we go to that next slide, Joelle? So these were provided in your participant packet. I'm not going to read them all now. These were adopted from the Maine Environmental Education Association, which Paige was involved with, that you heard from today. But we just want to make sure that when we get in these conversations together, and it's a lot harder to do on Zoom than it is in person, is that we all just try to be as present as possible and ground ourselves, because these could be some hard, demanding conversations. If you're a person that tends to hold the mic a lot, that occupies a lot of space, this may be a great time to step up and really become a good active listener. And if you're a person that tends to hang back and do a lot of listening, it's really, we really want to hear your voice. We want to hear everybody's voice in this. And we recognize that there's going to be multiple truths here, and that this isn't the place to try to hash out or argue or refute other people's truths. This is a place to be positive and share ideas. And can we go on to the next slide? And part of that whole notion is to, just because there are power imbalances everywhere, we just talked about that, and I think some people talked about that really well a few minutes ago, but we want to try to remove that as much as we can. So again, just if you feel like it's a good time to step back, then please do that. And then, the way we measure success in this whole project is different. It's not a linear, it's not like numbers, it's not a quantitative process, it's more qualitative. Again, where, this whole Convergence is about relationships. So kind of embrace that new measure of progress. And this is about, if we can create more authentic relationships here that can lead us towards a common goal, that's where we want to go. So just try to keep those things in mind as we have these conversations. And if the conversations do get a little much, a little hard, and you want a little support on that, Joel, can you go to the next slide? There is support available here. Is Heather back with us? I know her computer froze up, but I think she was going to talk about this a little bit.
Right here.
Oh, there you are.
Thanks, Scott.
You want to talk about why
Yeah.
people might want to?
Yeah, so we are totally acknowledging that these are not easy times that we're in right now. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. People are going through a lot of different things. And in the time that you're in the breakout groups, if there are hard conversations taking place and you're having big feelings and you'd like to sort of process some of that with someone, we have support available. So if you'd like to talk about any challenging issues that arise, please email. The email's right there, and we'll schedule a meeting with someone that can just sort of help hold space for you while you're just kind of processing whatever it is that you need to. So we have a support person available for white and Black and brown folks. So please use that in the event that you need it. Thank you.
So with that, I think we are ready to send everybody through cyberspace to some breakout rooms.
and I just want to remind folks that all of this information, there's like so much information we're gathering from these Jamboards. They're all being filtered back to your track team. Who will then like be sorting it and bringing information back to the next session. And breakout room facilitator. So also saying that you don't have to come to any consensus as a breakout group. By the end of your breakout group, that would be a ridiculous ask. So the other breakout room facilitators, you, once you get in your breakout rooms, you'll know which priority you're in, and also you can look at the spreadsheet. You're highlighted there if you're a breakout room facilitator. And please don't share your screen until after people have introduced themselves. And I think that's it for me.
Wow, that was amazing. So we are into cross-pollination mode here.
Oh, I didn't make the list of who was in what group, but I'll do that now.
I just saw it.
Julia and Chloe are farmland ones, so there. All right.
So this is where we give people an opportunity to sort of like talk about, in short form, summarize some of the ideas they came up with in their session, in their breakout group. Am I right?
Yeah, and also like or anything that there's just like a lot of energy behind, just to highlight that, because we're not, I mean, there's so much discussed, right, that we can't summarize it. Everything will get watered down. But if there's stuff that just a lot of energy was behind, to highlight a few of those pieces, I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
So Heather, I'm putting in the notes here so I'll just start it and then you can take over.
Sure.
Just for process. So if we could hear from Chloe's group first, and you have like a minute or two to share.
Fast.
And then we'll call on Julia's group, and you are both in the land and water rights and access. So that's the priority we're hearing from first.
Hi, so I don't know why my camera is not turning on suddenly, but this is Chloe. I want to offer anyone in my group, you have 5 seconds. If you want to present, you can cut in right now. Okay, so I think we talked about a bunch of different stuff. I think I would say towards the end, the activity that seemed to be the clearest like course of action was reaching out to our local politicians, and something we talked about was how reaching out under the name of the Maine Food Convergence or your own organization with the backing of a bunch of people behind you sort of has a good amount of weight behind it. And I think the general goal of that reaching out would be funding, which is what last week my group also came to the consensus of. But yeah, we were talking a lot about just trying to figure out ways we can get land and water rights to people that don't currently have access to it. Thinking about ways of redistributing land that we've taken, that white people have taken over time from Indigenous people here in Maine. And also thinking about how the economy affects land and how we use our land and the decisions people have to make based on supporting their family and the bottom line at the end of the day, how that impacts farmers and fishermen and all of that stuff. Yeah, any of my group members please feel free to chime in.
Although you only have about 20 seconds left.
I think you captured it pretty well, Chloe.
Thanks, Chris.
So Julia's group? Do you want me to just do this, Heather? Because I know you can't see your notes very well.
Yeah, I can't. Did you put it in the chat?
It's in the notes of the presentation, but you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can't see it.
Yeah. All right. Julia's group.
Yeah, Joe?
Yeah, yeah, we had a great discussion. We were also land and water rights and access, and acknowledging a lot of just cultural, cultural underpinnings around, what we value and how it's valued. That was a sort of a part of the discussion underneath it all. But really what rose to the surface, I think, and was, as Annie said, had a lot of energy around it, was really all about, Wabanaki voices being present in so many more places, whether it's on, boards of organizations or working with land trusts or helping craft policy, and having, funding potentially, tied to that, to supporting that, and including that in, so much more of the work going on statewide. That was really the thread that ran through a lot of what we talked about. We also talked a little bit about finding ways to connect, to connect around, incentivizing certain approaches and incentivizing, practices and activities that lead down that road of greater, greater awareness and greater access, across the state. So yeah, I mean, that was, I'm trying to look at the Jamboard now to remember some more specifics, but that really was the common thread, whether it was policy or funding, or, actual access work, was really about continuing to find ways to increase, support for those voices and increase their, ability to help the rest, help organizations and land trusts and policymakers have that, at the center of all their work, because that really is the kind of shift that we're needing to see.
I'll wrap it up here, Joe. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's it.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Julia. Okay, so we're on to the building bridges priorities, and just try to keep your share outs to a minute and a half, maybe. So Carl's group, who's sharing out?
Yeah, hi, that'd be me. I'm Aaron Englander, calling in from Rockport, Camden area, work with Maine Coast Heritage Trust and do some work with Nabizin on the Food Sovereignty Project. We had a really great conversation. One of the things I feel a lot of energy around is setting up some funding streams or a fund in itself for native food sovereignty work that people can buy into and support. There's a Black Farmers Fund out of New York, so something similar to that, where food related organizations, land trusts, landowners could potentially redirect funds, and it could be monetary, it could be food resources, seeds, anything like that. And then of course it needs to be coupled with listening sessions of what really the needs are, so we don't get into this, oh, this will be great for you, do it, so that it's really coming, what are the needs, so that there's the building bridges of listening to what the needs are and then having creative funding sources to support them. I know there's like 4 directions, and Bangor could be a neat possibility to channel funds through to Micmac Farms and Aroostook, the work Heather's doing, Brunswick, Nabizin. There's a lot of projects going on, and I think there would be a lot of buy-in from people involved in Maine foods and farms and lands. And the one other point I'll try to squeeze in real quickly was we talked about advocating for tribal sovereignty in Maine and the need to share stories, goes with the listening, but also doing the work within the organizations, personally working with Maine Coast Heritage Trust, MFCP, Maine Farmland Trust, others, how to keep the momentum and energy going for the kind of inter-organizational, institutional work that doesn't just happen on its own. So, that's a minute or and a half in a nutshell there. So thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. I'm seeing a thread here of the inner work between all of the priorities. I'm liking it. Shannon, how about your group?
Yeah, I had a really fantastic group. I really was loving our conversations. Very similar to building off of what Aaron was saying. And looking at specifically, we had a lot of conversations around reciprocity and just like giving of resources. Had some really lovely stories about donations of trees from Fedco, working with other farms to collaborate on getting seeds. So thinking about how can we be building towards reciprocity without, just giving without expectations of strings attached, just giving with humility and honoring that aspect of Wabanaki culture, I think is something that ran through a lot of our conversation. Also talking about a direct reparations of land and the land, looking at land base, especially in southern Maine, where we currently don't have a land base for Wabanaki peoples. And also talking about the history, some of the history of intentional erasing of Indigenous history and really doing some of that unsettling work of challenging white colonial narratives around this land and our understanding of our relationship with the land. But yeah, I think the reciprocity and the giving of resources, sharing of knowledge, access to knowledge, to be able to build trust through those sorts of giving exercises was something that was really important in our group.
Thanks, Shannon. All right, we're on to the climate resiliency and adaptation priority, and Joelle, your group, and then Jamie's group.
Sure, I'll try to summarize this. I'm looking at our Jamboard now. So one thing that came up in a few of our threads of conversation was the need for education. And one would be, in public schools regarding climate change and how agriculture affects that, but also down to up to the consumer. And then also looking at changes to federal policy through the lens of climate change. One thing that I remember Ken had brought up also is scaling, or the scale of these programs and resources, making them available to smaller sized farms. And I think Molly had brought up this issue as well. Specifically, so Molly, jump in anytime if you like, but I remember you mentioning that you were looking for resources in regards to climate change for small farms to reduce like your carbon footprint, and you finding that many of those programs were really just for large scale farms. So for any medium or small farms in Maine, there's not much going on. Maybe I should cut it off there. That's probably a minute.
Yeah, we're running out of time. Jamie, your group. Thanks, Joelle.
So I think I was nominated to try to summarize our exciting Jamboard also, which is really like, just solving the climate issue. So one of the things that we ended up with on our very busy Jamboard was this sticky, and I'm just going to read it so I can capture it. And it says, working across disciplines and across regions in a rural, farmer-centric fashion to support farmer-identified needs. And so everything that we came up with really felt like it was distilled into that point, that we have to have farm support. Nan had brought up, not to forget, that we had included reward systems. So for people who have already been doing it right, to try to have some incentives and some rewards for them. And then also, I think I had heard Joe say the same thing had come up in your group, creating incentives for people who are not yet there to be able to buy in and start doing it right, as far as what we know to be sort of science-based, climate-friendly practices and inclusive practices. So that's sort of what we came up with. It has to be a rural farmer-centric discussion with farmers at that table if we're going to be talking about the practices that they can make to sort of create better equity in our food system in a climate forward and focused way. And I hope I captured it. So everyone in my group, you can just privately curse me if I have missed anything.
Thanks, Rhiannon.
Thanks.
It's so amazing. I'm just back to Heather and Scott though.
Yeah, that was great. I love the farmer-centric, rural farmer-centric, and I saw Shannon smiling because we have a project going on that's totally about that here in Western Maine right now. We're just kicking off. So, wow, here we are. Another 3 hours up in smoke. That was great. Great work, everybody. Just remind everybody that the Slack channel is out there to continue these conversations. It hasn't really gained a lot of traction yet, but I feel like there's so much more that we could share out here. And I'm gonna, Heather and I and others will be looking at this stuff during the week and putting stuff out onto the Slack channel for comments. And yeah, anything to add, Annie, before we close out at 4:59?
Just a reminder that all the information in the Jamboards are all being collated and saved and sifted through and then looked at by your track teams to see what makes sense to move forward. And then we will look at that in session 3 and talk about how to organize for action, the who and the how.
Nice.
Move it forward.
Can we share this final quote as a checkout?
Yep.
I think this is such a beautiful quote. So in nature, everything works in collaboration. There are hummingbirds and flowers that are in such deep coordination, they need each other for survival. How vibrant and alive and successful could our movement be if we moved with such coordination and collaboration? Thanks, everybody. Awesome work. See you in a week.
Thanks, everybody, for being here.
Bring your friends next time.